3rd of October 2012. The forge at BAE Systems factory in Birtley is used for the last time. The process changed little in the 96 years the factory was open. In that time it produced a countless number of munitions for the armed forces of Britain and its allies. The Birtley factory was built in 1916, at the height of the First World War, after Britain, belatedly, realised it was engaged in a new and very different type of warfare. In December 1914, the war had been brought to the streets of Hartlepool, where more than 100 people, mostly civilians, had been killed during a German naval attack along the northeast coastline, designed to draw the British Navy into battle. And 4 months later, at the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle, the British Army fired more shells in 35 minutes than it had during the entire Boer War, which had ended just 13 years earlier. The inadequacy of supplies led to an outcry at home, the shell scandal, which saw the downfall of the government and the creation of a coalition to run the country, with David Lloyd George as Minister of Munitions. Building factories only solved half the problem. The factories needed workers, and more men were away fighting. The solution was found abroad and at home.
The Belgian government were in exile in London at the time, and they had lots of wounded soldiers who couldn't go home to Belgium because Belgium was partially occupied, and they wanted to contribute to the war effort in some way.
So the Belgians arrived in Birtley to work in the munitions factory. There were so many that their living quarters resembled a small town, and the refugee factory workers called it Elizabethville after their queen. During 3 years they produced 1.5 million shells. But such was the need for munitions workers that even 6,500 Belgians were not enough. In a move that marked a landmark step in a social revolution, another source of labour had to be recruited to work in a second Birtley factory, making cartridge cases for bullets.
1,200 women from the local area came to work in the cartridge case factory. They were very keen to come here because, for one reason, their fathers, brothers, husbands or sons could have been fighting in the war, and this was their contribution to the war effort, but also they were making fantastic money compared to what they had done previously.
Some things were not yet ready to change, however. Fences were built around the two factories to keep apart the Belgians and the Birtley women. Although the contribution to the war effort by the Birtley Belgians is now recognised, in 1918, when it was apparent hostilities were coming to a close, they were dispatched from the northeast with unseemly haste.
The government acted very quickly, and they didn't want to be caught in an embarrassing situation. They were having servicemen coming back from the war, and they had 6,500 Belgians who lived in much better housing than the local people did. They had electricity, they had inside toilets, they had running water. Anyway, the Belgians returned over about a 4 or 5 week period. In the end of 1918, they were shipped out of Hull across the North Sea and to Belgium. It took them about 3 days to get there because the North Sea was still mined, but they were so keen to get them back, and they were so keen to get back that they took a little circular route to get there.
After 1918, it was decided that munitions production was no longer needed at Birtley because Britain had, after all, just survived the war to end all wars. But that decision was reversed when it became obvious that Europe was once more heading towards catastrophe, and Birtley was again required to play a vital role in the war effort.